Hey guys, what's up? Abby here. Welcome to my Unholy DK 7.2.5 Defile guide. So I've been getting requested this a lot because it is a viable build for Mr. Sajin, Desolate Host, and really Harjaton as well. So a lot of people have been asking me about certain things about it, so I figured I'd just put it all into a video, talk about talents, rotation, legendaries, trinkets, all of that stuff. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first off, the level 56 talent tier, I personally run Ebon Fever about half to a little more than half the time. The other time I'm running Bursting Swords. All will serve as just crap. It's single target only. It's not even that good single target. But Bursting Swords is great if you're running Blighted Rune Weapon or Infected Claws or both, which with this build you can run both. However, I do like Ebon Fever most of the time because it's very easy to manage. Blighted Rune Weapon is a whole separate ability that you use and you have to manage, although there are some pretty cool combinations you can do with Blighted Rune Weapon that I'll go over later. So Bursting Swords, if the ads are not up for a long period of time and you really need to burst them down, similar to like a heroic Mr. Sajin or a Harjaton, then this is an incredible talent to run for those situations because you don't really want to be wasting runes on Festering Strike. You want to be pounding in your Clawing Shadows or your Scourge Strikes. So most of the time you're going to be running Ebon Fever, but on high burst fights you're going to be running Bursting Swords. Next up, the level 57 tier. Now for this tier, it's kind of a toss-up between Pestilent Pustules and Blighted Rune Weapon. Blighted Rune Weapon is very great and viable in AoE burst situations where you just want to put down your Defile and you want to spam Clawing Shadows or Scourge Strikes. However, runes are more valuable than wounds in most situations, so Blighted Rune Weapon doesn't really have as much value as Pestilent Pustules does. However, if you are running Bursting Swords and you are running Death March, which allows you to have more of those AoE burst situations, then Blighted Rune Weapon gains a lot of value. And again, in burst AoE situations, it is just a dominant talent. So those are the situations where you're going to want to run Blighted Rune Weapon over Pestilent Pustules. And I'll show you some examples later on about where Blighted Rune Weapon gains a lot of value in certain combination situations. Next up, we have the level 58 tier. Now for this tier, it's really a toss-up on any of them. However, Castigator just doesn't have as much value because with that talent, you do want to run more crit. And with this build, you just rather run more Mastery because that's just straight up damage and a decent amount of haste. Crit is usually the least valuable stat. So in most situations, we're just going to scrap Castigator, and it's between Unholy Frenzy and Clawing Shadows. Now for Unholy Frenzy, it allows you to have a lot of single target, especially if you are running Blighted Rune Weapon, Instructor's Fourth Lesson for a Legendary, or Infected Claws. You're going to be having a lot of wounds popping most of the time, and you're just going to have a pretty decent uptime on the Unholy Frenzy buff. So those are situations where Unholy Frenzy is good when you're running those talents, and it also offers more single target. Clawing Shadows, however, offers more AoE, and also situations where you have to be away from a boss or ads. It's on those points just dominant over Unholy Frenzy. So if you want more single target, you're going to run Unholy Frenzy. If you want more AoE, you're going to run Clawing Shadows. Next up, we have the level 60 tier. Now for this tier, I personally run Sludge Belcher because when you transform your ghoul, when you don't have Sludge Belcher picked, it does Sweeping Claws, which is an 8-yard frontal cone. However, when you do use Dark Transformation, when you have Sludge Belcher picked, it turns into an Abomination that does an 8-yard AoE circle all the way around it. So that just allows you to have more versatility with popping wounds via Black Claws and also the gas that just constantly AoEs. If there are ads behind the Sludge Belcher or in front of it, it's going to hit them regardless, which just allows you to have a little bit more AoEs in those kind of situations. However, if you need Asphyxiate for stuns or interrupts, or you also need Debilitating Infestation for the slow, then those are definitely viable in those situations. However, Sludge Belcher is going to offer you more AoE in most situations. Next up, we have the level 75 tier. Now for this tier, I personally run Lingering Apparition to kind of counter the movement problem that DKs have. However, Spell Eater is great in situations where you want a little bit more absorb out of your AMS, and Corpse Shield is great in situations where you need to soak something. If you are absolutely forced to soak something that AMS just won't cut, then Corpse Shield is a viable option in those situations. However, personally, I like to run Lingering Apparition more times than not. Next up, we have the level 90 tier. Now, for this tier, I personally choose Infected Claws for this build because it does make the cleave attack from your Belcher apply wounds. Those wounds can be popped all at once with your Defile, making this talent just incredibly strong for AoE situations. However, Shadow Infusion is still viable, but Infected Claws will give you more damage in a fight, especially if you are running Bursting Swords or, you are running Death March, which allows you to pop those wounds in an AoE situation more often before they drop off if you are not running Death March. So this is just an incredible talent to run for AoE, and it will usually beat out Shadow Infusion. Necrosis is a straight up single target talent, so we're not even going to think about that for this build. And last but not least, we have Defile, the staple talent with this build. What else do we need to say about it? Next up, we're going to be going over Trinkets. Now, there are two classifications of Trinkets for the build that we're going to be going over, and that's high risk, high parse Trinkets, and then the passive / consistent Trinkets. So again, with Trinkets, with anything that I'm going to be going over, any guides I'm going to be doing, we're going to have these classifications because there's going to be different situations where you're going to want to run different sets of Trinkets. Now, for this build, for the high risk, high parse, we're going to be really looking at Cradle of Anguish or Engine of Eradication. Those are trinkets that if you are able to meet the classifications for Cradle of Anguish, it's incredibly strong. If you are able to stay above 50% health, then it just gains a lot of value, and it's going to beat out most other trinkets if you're able to meet the standards. And for Engine of Eradication, if you are able to get decent procs at the right times, let's say you're doing a lot of AoE, ads are about to come up, you have all your cooldowns up, and then you get an engine proc, then that trinket's just going to be monstrous. It's going to offer a lot more damage. However, if you are on a progression fight, passive and consistent trinkets are going to be the ones you're going to want to run most often, and that's any stat stick. Probably Mastery. Let's be honest, Mastery is our best. So you're really going to want to run a Mastery passive / consistent stat stick. So those are the situations where you're really going to be picking different trinkets depending on your goal in a fight. Next segment, I'm going to be talking about the top legendaries for the build, but it's not going to be in a ranking order. It's just going to be the top 5 legendaries and why they're the top 5 legendaries. Of course, there are some that are significantly better than others, and I'll talk about that more as we go. So the first off, one of the best legendaries for the build, if not one of the staple legendaries for this build, is Death's March. Now, the reason this is so good is because it will lead to more Defiles in a fight. Now, if you're running Unholy Frenzy, you'll get even more Defiles because you'll get more Death Coils, which leads to a bigger cooldown reduction on Defile. This is an incredible legendary, can almost sometimes lead to a 80% or higher uptime of Defile. Incredible in fights with constant cleave, such as Desolate Host, and sometimes later on Harjaton has constant AoE that you won't really have Defile up for. This is an incredible legendary for those kind of instances. Next up, we have Soul the Deathlord. Now, the reason this legendary is so fucking strong is because it gives you access to 2 talents that are in the strongest tier. Now, of course, all will serve as kind of crap, but Bursting Swords and Ebon Fever are 2 of the strongest talents for Unholy DKs in general. So giving you access to both of them makes it just insanely strong, especially because they're crazy strong AoE talents, not to mention they're also very strong single target talents. This legendary is just insane. Next up, Kil'jaeden's Burning Wish. Now, the reason I have this in here is because it gives you a ton of valuable stats, gives you crit, haste, mastery, which are all phenomenal, a ton of strength, which is always nice, but it also has an incredibly strong use effect that does a ton of damage. 1.1 million if I'm correct. If it's at item level 970, that's just insane. That's a lot of damage. If you're on Harjaton, use it on the Sickly Tadpoles. That's almost 7 million damage from one use effect. That's pretty nuts. Next up, Cold Heart. And I mean, come on, it's Cold Heart. I mean, yeah, this is an AoE build, and most of the talents I've already mentioned are AoE, or not talents, but legendaries I've already mentioned are AoE legendaries. However, Cold Heart is just insane. Even though it's single target only, it offers so much fucking damage. Let's think about this. Kil'jaeden's Burning Wish has a use effect that you can use once every minute and 15 seconds, and if you use it on the Sickly Tadpoles, you get 7 million damage every 1 minute and 15 seconds. Cold Heart is giving you between 2 to 5 million, depending on if you get decent Concordance or Unholy Strength, every 40 seconds. So that can sometimes add to doing more AoE than Kil'jaeden's Burning Wish, And you can even do more than that because you have the possibility of both of them critting. It's just an insane legendary. It's just awesome. And if you're going for this build for a little bit more single target, running Unholy Frenzy, and you want to run Cold Heart because maybe you have to focus one target down specifically, while you can cleave, this is a very strong legendary for those instances. And last but not least, Instructor's fourth lesson. The reason this is so strong is because if you are pairing it up with Blighted Rune Weapon or Infected Claws, then you're going to have a lot of runes. Sometimes you'll have an abundance of wounds, and this legendary kind of gets rid of that problem. Not only gets rid of that problem, but just leading to more pops of your Festering Wounds, especially if you're running Bursting Swords, can just lead to a ton more damage. It's not as strong as the others, but it's still very strong for this build. So for rotation priority, it is pretty simple. Your highest priority is maintaining your Virulent Plague on a target, and your next highest priority is maximizing your Festering Wounds. Third is maximizing your Defile. So with all of this together, with Bursting Swords and Blighted Rune Weapon, of course, because I'm going to be showing some cool stuff you can do with Blighted Rune Weapon, your highest priority, of course, being your not Ebon Fever, but your Virulent Plague. And then next, if we pop our cooldowns right here, and then Gargoyle go in, we're just going to allow our Blighted Rune Weapon to get us to 6 here, and then we start using our auto attacks on other targets because we want to maximize our Blighted Rune Weapon. And then right here, and then we place down our Defile, start popping. So as you can see, of course, our Black Claws is also popping stuff, which kind of stinks sometimes because you would rather do it yourself because then you benefit from Bursting Swords. But it's okay when your Abomination does pop your Festering Wounds. It's completely fine. And then we're just going to use a Festering Strike here. And now we have a decent amount of wounds on all our targets with Defile coming up. We want to make sure that we have a good amount of both wounds and runes up for when Defile comes up. And right here, our wounds are about to fall off both spots. So I'm going to waste, and I'm going to waste some runes there so I can have a ample Defile here. So I have a decent amount of runes. So I'm going to pop my Defile so I don't waste any time with it. And of course, if we did have Soul of the Deathlord, we could also benefit from Ebon Fever. I am running my full-on Dark Arbiter build right now, or gear sets, not builds. But the damage potential of this build is pretty incredible. 1.5 mil DPS, when I was just kind of slowly showing the potential of it, is pretty phenomenal for a 3-target fight. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to give it a like and subscribe for more. The Frost Guide will be out early next week, and I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.